A gentle hum has faded from the world. In a quiet village nestled under a canopy of enchanted leaves, a young lore keeper named Alara makes a choice that will change everything. She decides to leave the safety of her scriptorium, the only home she has ever known, to seek the source of a fading magical resonance. This is not a simple journey. She risks her standing and the very stability of her village's protective enchantments to uncover a truth no one else dares to pursue. Her choice immediately sets her on a path where the cozy, familiar magic of her world begins to shift, hinting at a deeper, forgotten conflict. By the end of her story, you will understand the true power of unity and how forgotten histories can shape our world. What forgotten stories might be quietly humming just beyond the edge of your own perception. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? Dawn painted the sky in soft watercolor hues as Alara slipped a final vial of enchanted ink into her satchel. The liquid swirled with captured starlight, its glow a fragile promise against the coming unknown. Her fingers traced the delicate lines of a map, charting the world's hidden energy pathways, the ley lines that pulse like veins beneath the soil. With a whispered word, she activated a minor guidance charm, a simple crystal that floated just above her palm, casting a faint, pulsing light toward the forest's edge. The moment her foot crossed the village boundary, a subtle shudder ran through the air. It was not a sound, but a feeling, a tremor in the village's protective wards that resonated in the chest of every lore keeper still within the scriptorium. Whispers bloomed like morning frost on the windows, a ripple of concern, questioning the wisdom of her departure. Could a single novice truly understand a resonance that the most experienced elders viewed as a natural, gentle decline? Alara grappled with this doubt, her own insecurities a heavy weight in her pack. The summons came not long after, a sharp, insistent chime from the communication crystal at her belt. To ignore it was an act of profound defiance, a clear separation from the community that had shaped her. She closed her hand around the crystal, silencing its call, and in that moment, her commitment was sealed. This was no longer a mere inquiry, it was a mission. The consequences of an action were no longer abstract. The seasonal blessings that ensured the harvest were already beginning to falter, the magical resonance that plumped the fruits and grains growing faint. The stakes were now as tangible as the empty granaries they risked. Following the charm's persistent glow, she stepped into the shadows of the whispering woods. The familiar, cozy magic of her village fell away, replaced by an older, deeper energy, and then she felt it, not with her ears, but within her very being, a strange and harmonious hum that seemed to pull her forward, guiding her toward a destination not marked on any map. The ancient trees of the grove were living instruments, their bark etched with luminous patterns that pulsed in time with a deep, melodic hum. Alara felt the sound in her bones, a profound vibration that was both beautiful and heartbreakingly faint. She understood intuitively that this was a song of preservation, a magic actively holding itself together against an unseen entropy. Unrolling her parchment, she uncorked the vial of starlight ink. With careful, deliberate strokes, she began to trace the fading patterns from the bark onto the page. Each line she transcribed seemed to pull the humming resonance from the air itself, weaving it into the fibers of the parchment. As she worked, a soft, warm light began to emanate from her work, and the grove itself responded. The melodic hum grew momentarily stronger, the light from the trees brightening as if taking a deep, revitalizing breath. This sudden surge of energy did not go unnoticed. From behind veils of moss and within the canopy, pairs of luminous eyes appeared. The forest sprites emerged, their forms shimmering like captured moonlight. They watched her with a deep, ingrained caution, their postures tense. They remembered others who had come with tools and greed, who had taken the grove's song and left only silence in their wake. Alara felt their guarded gaze as a physical pressure. She knew any sudden movement could shatter this fragile moment. Her own resources were perilously low, but trust, she realized, required a genuine sacrifice. Slowly, without breaking eye contact with the nearest sprite, she placed her nearly empty vial of enchanted ink on a large, flat stone. This was not just ink. It was a piece of her craft, her purpose, and her security. The sprites observed the offering, their suspicion giving way to a quiet, collective contemplation. One brave sprite darted forward, its tiny fingers brushing against the vial, sensing the pure, untainted magic within. This small act of faith broke the tension. The sprite's demeanor softened, and they began to communicate not with words, but with shared images and emotions that blossomed in Alara's mind. She saw visions of other symbolic places, springs where the water no longer held visions, and standing stones where the echoes of ancient voices had grown quiet. The problem was not just her village or this single grove. A widespread change was leaching the magic from the world. The sprites, in turn, sensed her honest intent. In a final gesture of trust, they showed her a new path, one that led to a place they called the Heartwood Archive, a hidden repository of the world's oldest memories, sealed away and forgotten by all but the forest itself. It was a place that might hold the reason for the fading, and perhaps a way to restore it. The path the sprites revealed was not one of worn earth, but of faint, shimmering moss that guided her deeper into the woods. It ended at a sheer cliff face, overgrown with ivy that concealed a seamless stone door. Etched into its surface was a complex circle of glowing runes, a lock that pulsed with a slow, warning rhythm. This was the entrance to the Heartwood Archive, and it was clearly meant to stay closed. Alara's heart beat in time with the pulsing light as she studied the symbols. They were archaic, a language of creation and consequence. One misstep, one symbol incorrectly traced, and the magical protections woven into the stone would not just bar her entry, they would gently ease the knowledge she sought from her awareness entirely. She carefully mixed the last of her starlight ink with a drop of morning dew, her hand steady as she began to redraw the fading lines, not to break the lock, but to remind it of its original purpose, to welcome a true seeker. With a final, soft click, the great stone door slid silently into the ground, revealing the quiet space within. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged parchment and petrified wood. Light bloomed from her guidance crystal, illuminating a cavernous space. Towering shelves, carved from the living rock, held scrolls so ancient their edges crumbled at a touch. This was the library of the world's first memories. She unrolled the first scroll she could safely handle, its text glowing with a faint, silver light. It spoke of the architects of magic, beings who had not commanded the world's energy, but who had listened to its natural song and woven enchantments to harmonize with it They built the cozy, familiar magics not as commands, but as gentle agreements with the world itself. Yet as she read, she saw the archive was unwell. The glow of the scrolls was dimming, and fine, gray dust, like ash, fell steadily from the ceiling. The memory of this place was fading alongside the magic it documented. A deep grinding sound echoed through the chamber, and from the shadows behind a central pillar, a massive form stirred. It was a golem, its body formed of the same stone as the archive, with eyes that were only hollow sockets, until they ignited with a piercing blue light. It was the archive's silent guardian, awakened by her arrival. It did not speak, but a wave of pure intent washed over her, a single, demanding question. Who are you to disturb this slumber? Her first instinct was to explain, to plead her case, but words felt fragile against its stone silence. Force was unthinkable, not just futile, but a betrayal of the very preservation this place stood for. Then she remembered a phrase from the scroll, an oath spoken by the first weavers. She closed her eyes, pushing aside her fear, and let the words flow from her in a quiet, steady stream. I am a keeper of stories, a mender of songs. I come to listen, not to take. The blue light in the golem's eyes softened to a gentle, accepting glow. It took a step back, its stone form settling into a watchful, patient stance. The permission was granted. With the Guardian's trust, Alara could now study the most fragile scrolls. She discovered the core of the crisis. The magic of the world was not meant to be a static, finite resource. It was a cycle, requiring a ritual of renewal, performed by those who understood the original weaver's intent. This ritual had been lost to time, and without it, the enchantments were slowly unraveling, fading back into the quiet earth. The cozy lights of village hearths, the blessings of abundant harvests, the very hum of the grove, all of it was temporary, sustained by an echo that was finally growing faint. Working quickly with a fresh piece of parchment, Alara began to copy the fragmented instructions for the renewal ritual. The script was complex, a weaving of symbols and tonal patterns that made her head spin. She had just transcribed a crucial passage about aligning with the heart of the forest when a low tremor ran through the archive. It was not the golem. This vibration came from deep below, a resonant shudder that dislodged a shower of stone dust. Her actions in unsealing the archive had not just awakened its guardian, they had stirred something else, something ancient and slumbering that now began to shift in the roots of the whispering woods. The tremor was a guide, a deep thrumming in the earth that pulled Alara from the silent archive. She followed the vibration through the woods until she reached a circular clearing bathed in an ethereal, silver light. There, the air itself shimmered, and from the shimmer stepped the spectral echoes of the first architects. They were not solid, but figures of woven light and shadow, their forms repeating the same graceful, deliberate motions over and over. This was a memory, a fragment of the very ritual she had read about, playing out like a ghostly performance for an audience of one. Their hands traced intricate patterns in the air, and with each movement, the clearing hummed with a power that made the tiny hairs on her arms stand on end. She had to capture this. Fumbling in her satchel, she pulled out her last piece of special parchment, the one infused with moon silver fibers, designed to hold impressions of magic itself. Uncorking her nearly empty ink vial, she began to draw, not the figures, but the energy they were weaving. Her hand moved in a frantic dance, translating the ephemeral movements into solid lines and symbols. As she worked, a profound weariness seeped into her bones. It felt as if the act of recording was pulling the very vitality from her, the ink on the page glowing brighter as her own energy dimmed. The spectral echoes began to flicker, their forms growing transparent, as if the effort of being remembered was too much for them to sustain. Her vision swam, a wave of dizziness threatening to topple her, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. The knowledge was more important than her comfort, more vital than a moment of rest. With a final, shaking stroke, she completed the last symbol. The parchment flared with a soft, steady light, and the image of the ritual step was permanently sealed upon it. A clear, undeniable clue was now in her possession, and the success sent a jolt of renewed hope through her exhaustion. But her triumph was short-lived. As the last echo faded from the clearing, a new presence made itself known. From the shadows between the trees, a creeping, silent gray mist began to uncoil. It did not move like natural fog. It slid over the ground, and where it touched, the vibrant greens of the moss seemed to dull, and the gentle hum of the forest fell into an unnerving quiet. This was not mere decay. It felt like an active force, a void that consumed magic itself. Watching the mist advance, Alara knew that finding the ritual was only half the answer. She now needed to understand what she was facing. Rolling her precious parchment safely away, she turned her thoughts to the old tales, the legends of a reclusive Starlight Weaver who lived high in the mountains, a figure said to understand the balance between light and the silence that follows it. The mountain path was a spiral of crystal and starlight, leading Alara to a peak where the air was thin and the sky felt close enough to touch. Orion's observatory was not a building of stone, but a delicate lattice of solidified moonlight, its spires humming with a soft, lonely song. As she approached, the very light of the structure seemed to tense, the humming shifting to a defensive, warning pitch. A figure emerged from the woven radiance, his form tall, and his eyes holding the deep, patient weariness of one who has watched the stars for centuries. He was Orion, the Starlight Weaver, and his sanctuary was his entire world. He did not raise a hand or voice, but the air before him thickened into a shimmering barrier of pure light. "You should not have come here," his voice echoed not in her ears, but directly in her mind. "Your quest carries a shadow that could smother my last refuge." Alara did not try to push forward. Instead, she knelt, unrolling the precious parchment that held the recorded echo of the architect's ritual. The symbols she had drawn pulsed with the faint, desperate energy of that spectral performance. She let the scroll speak for her, the visual hum of a fading magic filling the space between them. "I am not asking you to fight," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I am asking you to help me remember. I have their movements, but I lack the thread to weave them back into the world. Your light could be that thread." Orion's stern expression faltered. He watched the pulsing parchment, his own craft resonating with the ancient patterns. He saw not just the symbols, but the immense personal cost in every line, the weariness in Alara's eyes that mirrored the fading of the scroll's own glow. The fear in his heart was a real one, that the silent, consuming mist following her would find his mountain and extinguish his starlight forever. But her offering was one of pure preservation, not conquest. To convince him completely, Alara made a final, profound offer. "If the mist comes, I will lead it away from this peak. My path is already marked by its attention. You and your craft can remain hidden, safe. This selfless promise broke his final resistance. The defensive barrier of light dissolved into a gentle, welcoming glow. Come, he said, his mental voice now soft with a sorrowful resolve. I will show you what starlight can still do. Inside the observatory, he guided her hands, teaching her to gather the ambient starlight and spin it into a tangible, reinforcing thread. It was a simple technique, a foundational act of his craft, where intention and light were woven together to mend small fractures in the world's magical fabric. As she practiced, they both looked down from the great height toward the valleys far below. The gray mist was no longer a distant threat. It moved like a slow, silent tide, swallowing meadows and forests, and the gentle lights of hidden magical communities winked out one by one beneath its advance. The need was immediate and vast. This cannot be mended from a distance, Orion stated, his decision made. The problem is a sickness at the source. We must go to the crystal caves, where the heart of the world's magic is said to pulse. There, with the ritual you have recorded and the light we can weave, we may perform a diagnostic ritual. We might finally see the true nature of this imbalance. The entrance to the crystal caves was a fissure in the mountain's heart, breathing out air that hummed with a deep, resonant energy. Inside, the walls were a tapestry of enormous geodes, their crystalline facets capturing and refracting the faint starlight Orion wove from his fingertips. This delicate illumination was their only guide through a labyrinth that seemed to shift and breathe around them. Strange, dissonant chimes echoed through the chambers, a defensive magic designed to disorient and mislead any intruder. One wrong step could send a person wandering in circles for days, lost in a maze of their own confusion. Alara focused on the map of ley lines in her mind, using her lore keeper's intuition to feel for the strongest pull of energy, the path that led inward toward the source. The air grew thicker, the hum more intense, until they stepped into the vast central chamber. There, hanging in the center of the cavern, was the heart of the world's magic, a colossal crystal that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. But its glow was irregular, flickering like a struggling heartbeat. Jagged, dark fractures ran across its surface, and from these cracks streamed a constant, shimmering energy that was immediately consumed by the same silent, gray mist that now coiled at the edges of the chamber, growing denser with every stolen spark. The magic meant to sustain the realm was leaking away, feeding the very force that sought to erase it. The cave, sensing their presence as a disturbance, reacted strongly. The crystals around them flared, and the air itself seemed to curdle with their own fears. Orion flinched as a phantom voice, cold and sharp, whispered that his isolation was a virtue and that joining this quest was his greatest failure. For Alara, the illusion was a vision of her village, the protective wards failing completely, the cozy hearths flickering out as the elders shook their heads in silent, final disappointment. These were not mere images, they were emotional challenges that tested their will and clouded their judgment. Pushing through the psychic pressure felt like wading through deep water. Alara knew they could not fight this with more force. The cave's magic was sentient, a guardian of the Heartstone, and it was terrified. She closed her eyes, pushing aside the haunting image of her home, and searched her memory for the oldest song she knew, a lullaby from the earliest scrolls. a melody meant not for children, but for soothing restless spirits and calming wild, ancient magic. Her voice, when it came, was unsteady at first, a fragile thread of sound in the vast, watchful space. She sang the simple, repetitive notes, imbuing them with all her intent, her desire not to take, but to heal. The song was a risk, an offering that could either ease the cave's defensive panic or be seen as a further provocation. For a long moment, nothing changed. Then, the dissonant chimes began to soften, their harsh edges smoothing to harmonize with her melody. The fearful illusions flickered and dissolved. The cave was listening. As the lullaby wove through the chamber, the central crystal's frantic pulsing began to slow, its light growing steadier and brighter. In this renewed radiance, an inscription carved around the crystal's base became visible, its letters glowing with a soft, golden light. It spoke of a concord, a ritual of unity that required the combined strengths of all the magical peoples, the Starlight Weavers, the Forest Sprites, the Stone Guardians, and the Lore Keepers, each contributing a unique thread to the great tapestry. The message was clear. No single person or craft could mend this fracture. The cozy ambience of their entire world did not depend on a single source of power, but on the harmonious relationship between all its guardians. The fading was a symptom of a deeper disconnect, a silence that had grown between the world's magical hearts. With the cave now calm, the immediate challenge was averted, but the true work was just beginning. How does one gather such disparate beings, creatures of starlight, stone, and root, when many have been isolated for centuries, guarding their own fragile sanctuaries? The inscription provided the answer, but the path to achieving such a unity seemed more daunting than any cave or mountain. The summons went out on wings of starlight, and whispers carried on the root networks beneath the soil. Enchanted messengers, fragile constructs of light and intent, traveled to the hidden refuges of every magical being Alara and Orion could recall from the old texts. They called for a gathering at the sacred Grove of Whispers, the very place where Alara had first earned the trust of the forest sprites. One by one, they arrived, their forms a testament to the world's beautiful diversity. The sprites shimmered into view among the leaves, their light a nervous flicker. The great stone golems from the deep places emerged from the earth, their steps slow and deliberate, their hollow eyes scanning the assembly with ancient caution. A handful of other Starlight Weavers, drawn by Orion's call, stood together, their robes woven from constellations, their faces etched with the fear of leaving their isolated sanctuaries. The air in the grove grew thick with a tension far heavier than the humidity. Old grievances, centuries old, surfaced in clipped tones and guarded postures. A Starlight Weaver suggested the earth-bound golems had kept the deep magics too close, allowing the foundational energies to grow still. A Sprite elder, her voice like the rustle of autumn leaves, gently noted that the weavers had perhaps drawn too much power into the sky, forgetting the songs of the soil. The council, meant to be a united front, teetered on the edge of collapse before a single plan could be proposed. The very mistrust that had allowed the magical disconnect to grow now threatened to be their final undoing. It was Alara who stepped into the center of the discord. She did not shout over them. Instead, she unrolled her collection of parchments, laying them on a flat stone for all to see. There was the map of fading ley lines, the transcription from the Heartwood Archive, showing the slow unraveling, and the precious page, holding the echo of the architect's ritual. She let the evidence speak, the visual proof of a decay that affected them all equally. The sprites recognized the dimming patterns from their own groves. The golems felt the truth in the fractured lines depicting the world's core. The weavers saw their own potential fading in the dimming light. Her quiet presentation forged a fragile, silent consensus. They would listen, yet listening did not mean agreeing. The debate over a solution began immediately. Some argued for a massive, combined effort to gently push back the gray mist, a show of unity to reclaim their world. Others spoke of a different path, a pooling of their remaining power to create one last, protected sanctuary, stepping back from the rest of the world. The voices rose, full of concern and old uncertainty, and the council seemed ready to splinter once more. It was then that Alara proposed her pact. She pointed to the ritual inscription, to the clear need for a combined strength. "We do not fight the silence with noise, nor do we hide from it," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We answer it with a chord. Each of you holds a unique note in the world's song. The sprites hold the melody of life, the golems the rhythm of the earth, the weavers the harmony of the sky. We must willingly contribute a thread of our core essence, not to fight, but to reweave. We must perform the renewal ritual together." As if her words had summoned its attention, the gray mist began to creep into the edges of the grove. It slid between the ancient trees, and where it touched, the luminous bark dimmed and the gentle hum of the place faltered, dropping into an unnerving quiet. The sacred space, their chosen meeting ground, was no longer safe. The theoretical concern was now at their feet, a silent, creeping reminder. Delay meant the loss of their last haven and the fading of their last hope. The sight of the advancing stillness, more than any argument, solidified their resolve. A hesitant, wordless agreement passed between the leaders of each group. They would attempt the pact. With this fragile unity in place, the council made its decision. The ritual could not be performed in a place already being touched by the quiet. They had to journey to the Sky-span Bridge, a legendary arch of crystal and light that connected the highest peak to the strongest ley line confluence. It was a site of immense power, said to be where the first architects had woven the earliest enchantments. It was the only place where their combined chord could possibly reach the heart of the world. Their path was set, a hopeful pilgrimage to the world's highest nerve, with the quiet mist following their every step. Their journey was a moving fortress of light against the encroaching silence. The Starlight Weavers spun domes of soft radiance over the caravan, while the forest sprites wove shields of rustling leaves and humming vitality. The stone golems walked the perimeter, their heavy footfalls creating a resonant rhythm in the earth that seemed to push back against the mist's unnatural quiet. Together, they forged a path through landscapes where magic had already faded, where rivers ran silent and the very colors of the world had dulled to gray. In these drained places, their combined efforts were not just protection, but a small act of reclamation, a pocket of living sound and color in a world growing still. The mist did not simply follow, it tested them. It surged in sudden, aggressive waves, probing for weakness in their magical defenses. It sought to separate them, creating phantom cries for help to lure a golem away from the group. or whispering insidious doubts to a weaver about the loyalty of their earthly companions. Each time the group held firm, their trust was reforged a little stronger. A Starlight Weaver, noticing a sprite shivering with exhaustion, shared a thread of warming light. A golem, with surprising gentleness, used its stone hand to lift a weary sprite over a treacherous fissure. These small, unspoken acts began to mend tears in the fabric of their alliance that were centuries old. The true test came when a sudden, violent surge of mist encircled one of the youngest sprites, cutting it off from the main group. The creature's light flickered in panic as the silence pressed in, threatening to snuff it out. Without a second thought, Alara broke from the safety of the glowing dome. Ignoring the shouts of warning, she plunged into the gray swirl, her hands outstretched. The moment she touched the mist, a profound coldness seeped into her, and a wave of despair whispered that her efforts were meaningless, that silence was the world's true and final state. Gritting her teeth against the psychic assault, she grabbed the sprite and pulled it back into the light, collapsing safely within the renewed boundary of their combined magic. Her simple, selfless action did more than save a single life. It proved her leadership was born of genuine care, not a desire for command, and it inspired every member of the caravan to protect one another with the same fierce commitment. It was during this constant, low-level conflict that they understood the mist's true nature. It was not a mindless force of decay, but a sentient presence that fed on their fear and discord. Their arguments made it stronger, their suspicion gave it form. Their growing harmony, however, acted as a shield. The very sound of their cooperation, the hum of different magics working in concert, caused the mist to recoil as if from a physical blow. Their internal unity was their only real defense. After a long and wearying climb, the path finally curved around the mountain's shoulder, revealing their destination. There, spanning a chasm that dropped away into clouds, was the Sky-Span Bridge. It was a breathtaking arch of woven crystal and solidified light, shimmering with a soft, internal pulse. But the sight brought no relief, only a sobering understanding of the task ahead. To cross it and perform the ritual at its apex would mean stepping completely out of their protective dome and into the heart of the thinning air, exposed and vulnerable. They had survived the journey, but the most demanding challenge still lay before them, a test of their fragile, hard-won unity on a bridge between heaven and earth. The bridge hummed beneath their feet, a resonant chord waiting for its final note. At the apex of the sky span, surrounded by the vastness of the sky, the diverse assembly formed a circle. Alara unrolled the ritual parchment, its symbols glowing with a faint, determined light. Orion began, his hands weaving threads of pure starlight into the air, a shimmering lattice of celestial harmony. The forest sprites added their contribution, a rising chorus of melodic hums and rustling leaves that wove the vibrant song of life into the structure. Then the stone golems spoke, not with voices, but with a deep, grounding vibration that rose through the soles of their feet, the steady rhythm of the earth itself. Alara, the final thread, added the ink lore, tracing the ancient symbols from her scroll into the weave, binding the disparate energies together with the power of recorded memory and intent. For a breathtaking moment, it worked. A wave of warm, golden light pulsed out from the bridge, washing over the land below. The gray mist recoiled as if touched by warmth, shrinking back from the vibrant valleys and forests. Far below, the cozy lights of villages flickered brightly once more, and the gentle hum of the whispering woods returned, stronger and clearer than it had been in years. The world seemed to take a deep, revitalizing breath, its magical ambience restored in a surge of hopeful energy, but the silence would not be broken so easily. The retreating mist did not dissipate. Instead, it coalesced directly before them, swirling into a turbulent vortex of negation. It was a tear in the fabric of sound itself, a roaring quiet that actively pulled at the edges of their beautiful weave. The harmonious structure began to fray, the starlight threads snapping, the earth song faltering. Maintaining the ritual was no longer an act of creation, but a profound test of concentration against a force that sought to unmake reality itself. The strain was immense, a physical and mental weight that challenged their collective will. Seeing the weave unravel, Alara knew a greater commitment was needed. The ritual required a catalyst, a spark of pure, selfless life to fully bind the magic. Without a second thought, she closed her eyes and reached inward, channeling her own vitality into the faltering pattern. A soft, warm light flowed from her hands, reinforcing the fraying threads, but the shift was immediate and sobering. The color faded from her face, and her legs wavered, though she remained standing through sheer force of will. She was weaving the very essence of her being into the world's healing. Her profound act raised the stakes to their absolute peak. The ritual's success now depended on every single participant, holding their part of the weave with unwavering focus. If one Starlight Weaver faltered, or one golem lost its rhythm, or if Alara's strength gave out completely, the entire construct would shatter. The consequence would not be a return to the slow fade, but a complete, permanent end. The cozy enchantments of the world, the gentle magic in every hearth and forest, would be stilled forever, leaving behind only an unbreakable, eternal silence. As their combined power reached its zenith, fueled by Alara's ultimate offering, the vortex of negation shuddered. It could not withstand the pure, unified chord of creation. Compressing under the pressure, the formless mist solidified into a single, tangible presence, a silent, shimmering figure of condensed stillness that stood opposed to their circle, a final, sentient embodiment of the quiet they had come to heal. The figure of condensed stillness did not advance. It simply was, a silent anchor in the swirling energies of their ritual. Its form held the ghost of a face, etched not with malice, but with an ancient, profound sorrow. In a voice that was the absence of sound, a thought that bloomed directly in their minds, it spoke its truth. I am what remains of the great weave's breaking, a memory of the silence that followed. You weave warmth and light, but you cannot weave away the echo of that transition. I have no place in your cozy world. Its words were not an attack, but a statement of its own perceived purpose, a belief that its existence was defined only by the emptiness it carried. Alara understood that force was the language this construct expected, the very thing that would validate its sorrow, so she did the opposite. She lowered her hands, her own light still flowing, but now in a gesture of offering, not defiance. You are not an echo of that transition, she replied, her voice thin with effort but clear. You are a reminder, and every cozy hearth needs a quiet corner for reflection. I offer you a thread in this new weave, not to erase you, but to give your silence a purpose. The negation recoiled, its form shimmering with confusion. This was not part of the old story of conflict it knew. It had been created to contain the chaotic fallout of a long-past magical event, to hold the memory so the world could eventually heal. It had done its job too well, forgetting anything but the stillness it guarded. The construct resisted, its form wavering. My nature is to still, to quiet. I would extinguish the very magic you seek to save. The great weave began to flicker in response to its distress, the golden light pulsing erratically. The other beings held their positions, their trust in Alara, a taut, silent thread. To convince this embodiment of sorrow, she knew she had to speak its language. She opened her own memories, sharing not just images, but the feelings themselves. She let the construct feel the weight of her own fear when she left her village, the sharp sting of the elders' disapproval, and the deep, personal ache of thinking she had failed everyone. I know the shape of silence, she whispered. It is not an enemy. It is the space where hope is chosen. You can be the guardian of that space, the quiet that allows a song to be truly heard. This act of radical empathy created a crack in the construct's long-held certainty. It saw that its sorrow was not unique, but a shared thread in the tapestry of existence. The idea of transformation, of finding a new purpose, was a foreign and terrifying concept. Yet the alternative was the complete unraveling of the ritual and the permanent stillness it would bring. A fate that now felt like a failure of its original, protective function. The group, witnessing this exchange, felt their own perspectives shift. They saw not a being to be defeated, but a lost guardian who had been alone for millennia. In a united, unspoken decision, they adjusted their contributions. The Starlight Weavers softened their light to a gentle glow. The Sprites hummed a lullaby of understanding, and the golems sent a steady, accepting rhythm through the bridge. They were not just holding the weave, they were reshaping it to include a place for quiet contemplation. The sentient mist hesitated at the edge of their renewed circle. Its integration was the final, crucial step, the acceptance of sorrow as a part of life's balance. This was the ultimate test of their unity, to willingly invite the embodiment of stillness into the heart of their creation. As the weave flickered more urgently, the construct slowly, tentatively, reached out a wisp of its form and touched the edge of the golden pattern. Instead of extinguishing the light, its touch deepened the color, adding a profound, resonant depth to the magic, like the quiet moment after a beautiful piece of music ends. The renewal was finally complete, but the true consequences of this new, inclusive balance were only just beginning to resonate across the world. The circle of light did not break as the sentient mist stepped inside. Its form shimmered, still holding the deep chill of forgotten sorrows. Alara met its silent gaze and offered the first thread, a memory of the first time she had successfully transcribed a complex enchantment, the warm thrill of understanding flowing through her fingers. The memory, bright and specific, wove into the mist, and a single point within it began to glow with a soft, golden light. Orion followed, sharing a vision of his first perfect constellation, woven from starlight, a moment of pure, solitary joy. A forest sprite hummed a memory of a sapling's first leaves unfurling under its care. One by one, the council members gave these gifts, not of power, but of meaning. Each positive memory was a stitch in a new tapestry, reshaping the formless negation. The mist began to coalesce, its chaotic swirls organizing into a tall, serene figure of woven light and shadow, a guardian whose very presence now resonated with a deep, calming quiet. A final, brilliant surge of magic pulsed from the sky-span bridge, washing over the world in a visible wave of warmth. Far below, the cozy ambience of every village and forest not only returned but flourished. Hearth fires burned with a steadier, brighter flame, enchanted gardens bloomed with impossible colors, and the very air hummed with a harmonious energy that felt both new and ancient. The transformed construct lifted its hands, and where it gestured, the last remnants of the invasive gray mist dissolved not into nothingness, but into a peaceful, reflective silence, a necessary balance within the vibrant sound. It had become a sentinel, a permanent guardian against unchecked decay. Yet the cost of this unity was etched on every face, the emotional toll of sharing their most cherished memories and accepting a former presence that once stood apart left them all feeling raw and exposed. As the brilliant light of the ritual faded, a palpable tension remained. One of the elder golems voiced the concern, quietly rumbling through the assembly. Can we truly trust this new peace, or is the stillness merely waiting for a moment of discord to return to its old nature? The thought of a return to earlier times was a quiet worry in their midst, a shadow that could undermine everything they had built. Alara, her own strength barely a flicker, stepped forward. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of her journey. "I will vouch for this guardian," she stated. "My path is now bound to its purpose. I will remain as a lore keeper at the bridge, to monitor its integration and ensure its silence remains one of preservation, not negation." This was her final decision, a personal pledge that offered the reassurance the others needed. It was a promise of ongoing vigilance, a recognition that their victory was not an end, but a new beginning that required conscious care. This act solidified the new era. The successful unity had done more than save their magic. It had woven their disparate communities into a single, interconnected network. The stakes had escalated from mere survival to the active stewardship of an entire world's magical well-being. The cozy glow in every home was now a shared responsibility, a light that each of them was pledged to maintain. With a final, shared look of understanding and weary hope, the council began to disperse. The Starlight Weavers rose into the sky, the Sprites faded into the trees, and the golems sank into the earth, each carrying back to their homes not just the news of their salvation, but a renewed sense of purpose and a profound connection to every other heart beating in rhythm with the world. The familiar path back to her village felt different beneath Alara's feet, softened by the world's renewed hum. She found the protective wards around her home, flickering with the same old, predictable rhythm, their magic strong but isolated, like a single voice singing in an empty room. Drawing from her expanded understanding, she did not simply reinforce the old patterns. Instead, she gathered the villagers and, using a blend of starlight ink and earthy pigments, began to weave new symbols into the wards. She showed them how the steady rhythm of the golems could ground their magic, how the Sprite's melodic hum could bring it flexibility, and how even the quiet, watchful presence of the new sentinel provided a space for the enchantment to rest and deepen. The village's protective glow shifted, becoming a richer, more complex tapestry of interlocking lights, its magic now resilient because it was diverse. This new approach was met with quiet resistance from some. An elder lore keeper frowned at the unfamiliar symbols, voicing a concern that echoed through the gathered crowd. Inviting the influence of those we once saw as separate, even adversarial, feels like a risk. Can we trust a magic that includes the quiet that once sought to still us? Alara did not argue. She simply pointed to the newly woven ward as a gentle evening rain began to fall. Where once the raindrops would have sizzled and evaporated against a shield of pure force, they now slid gracefully down the invisible barrier, gathering into tiny, prismatic droplets that hummed with a soft, collective light. The ward was not just blocking the rain, it was interacting with it, turning a simple weather event into a moment of minor beauty. This tangible proof, this cozy, practical magic, did more than any argument could to soothe their fears. In recognition of her journey and her new role as a bridge between worlds, the elder lore keepers presented her with the formal robes of a master archivist. The title, however, felt too small for the purpose she now saw. A single archive, no matter how well kept, was not enough to maintain the balance they had fought for. The memory of the Council's initial discord was a fresh reminder of how easily knowledge could be lost, and isolation could breed mistrust. She made her decision known to the village. She would establish a traveling school, a moving scriptorium that would carry the renewed lore of Unity to every willing community. Her focus would be on teaching others how to listen to the different songs of the world and weave them together. As she packed her satchel with freshly mixed inks for that first journey, a quiet contentment settled over her. The stakes had not vanished, they had simply transformed. The cozy ambience of every hearth and every forest was no longer a fragile gift, but a shared responsibility, a living tapestry that required constant, caring collaboration to maintain. Her new mission was not to fight a single great challenge, but to nurture countless small connections, ensuring the world's magic remained a harmonious chorus for all time. The final confrontation was not a battle of force, but a collision of philosophies. The sentient negation stood before them on the bridge, a vortex of roaring silence that threatened to unravel their beautiful weave. It was the embodiment of every forgotten story, every sorrow left unacknowledged, and it believed its only purpose was to return the world to a state of quiet. Alara felt the immense pressure of its despair, a weight that challenged the very core of their hopeful alliance. She knew that to fight it with the same power they had woven would only validate its existence, proving that conflict was the world's true nature. The only path forward was the one no one had taken before, to offer understanding where there had only been fear. She stepped forward, her own light a fragile candle against the storm of stillness, and spoke not a challenge, but an invitation. "I see the purpose you have served," she said, her voice resonating with the empathy learned from Sprites, the patience learned from stone, and the hope learned from starlight. "You held the memory of a great breaking, so the world could eventually heal, but that healing is here, and your purpose can evolve. We are not asking you to cease, but to change. Join this weave. Let your silence become the space between notes that makes the music beautiful." The construct recoiled, its form rippling with confusion and a deep, ancient sorrow. To change was a terrifying concept, a dissolution of the identity it had held for millennia. It resisted, and the golden tapestry of their ritual flickered dangerously, the cozy lights of the world below dimming in response. The unity of the council was being tested to its absolute limit. It was then that Alara made her ultimate offering. She did not channel more power. She channeled her very essence, her life force, into the gesture. A warm, steady light flowed from her, not to attack the negation, but to embrace it, weaving a thread of unconditional acceptance into its core. The color drained from her face, and her knees buckled, though she remained standing, upheld by the collective will of the beings behind her. Her act was one of pure leadership, proving that true strength lies in vulnerability and the courage to care for even that which seems opposed to you. This profound offering created a crack in the negation's certainty. It saw that its solitude was a choice, not a sentence. The warmth of Alara's empathy began to thaw its frozen purpose. Slowly, hesitantly, the sentient mist reached out a wisp of its form and touched the edge of the golden weave. Instead of extinguishing the light, its touch deepened it, adding a profound, resonant depth to the magic, like the peaceful quiet of a library or the reflective hush of a snowfall. In that moment of harmonious fusion, a brilliant wave of energy erupted from the sky-span bridge. It washed over the world in a visible tide of renewal, restoring every cozy enchantment not to its former state, but to something richer and more resilient. The magic was now a complete tapestry, woven with threads of joy, sorrow, sound, and silence, each giving meaning to the other. Alara, having given everything to broker this piece, had become more than a lore keeper or a leader. She had become a true architect of magic, not by building anew, but by remembering the most powerful enchantment of all, the magic of a compassionate and inclusive heart. The world's hum was no longer a fragile thread, but a resilient chorus. For Alara, the familiar scriptorium felt both like home and a place she had outgrown. Her new role as a traveling teacher was not a burden, but a natural extension of her journey, a way to tend the roots of the unity they had all worked to create. The cozy ambience that now warmed every village hearth and rustled through every enchanted forest was not a return to the old, simple ways. It was something richer, a living tapestry woven from countless different threads of magic, each one strengthening the whole. Her personal evolution was complete, not as a solitary keeper of secrets, but as a bridge between worlds, a weaver of connections. This brought a deep, quiet peace, the kind found not in the absence of challenge, but in the purpose of meaningful work. The need for attentiveness remained, of course, a gentle undercurrent in her daily life. A faded rune on a village well required a lesson in starlight reinforcement. A misunderstanding between a Sprite clan and a local community called for patient translation. These were not crises, but reminders that their magical world was a garden that required constant, caring attention from many hands. The true legacy of her journey was this understanding, that magic is most luminous when it is cherished by all, a shared treasure whose story is never truly finished, but always being written anew.